So we just finished talking about the 7 principles of the quality management system. Now we're going to talk about the 10 clauses of ISO 9001. So which are these 10 clauses are presented in the ISO 9001, the 2015 revision, which of course you can purchase using this link right here in the official website of ISO. Now, I don't want you to think of the principles and the clauses as different things, as they both serve the same thing, which is of course the effectiveness, an effective and a successful quality management system. Think of the clauses of a more detailed steps or actions that the organization should take. So, ISO 9001 defines the requirements that an organization has to meet to gain the certification, and of course it contains these 10 clauses. And you will see that most of these clauses that we've talked about, most of these clauses in the 7 principles, like leadership, for example. We've already seen leadership in the principles, and we've seen improvement in the principles. So you'll see that a lot of things that we've seen in the principles are again repeated in the clauses, but just in more detail. So we're going to go through each one of these 10 clauses, but for now let's take a general look of these clauses. So the standard suggests that the organization is required to understand its context, and it is required to determine the needs and expectations of interested parties, of anyone involved, like customers and donors and so on. And this is basically clause 4. Now, once these are documented, we move on to planning the quality management system, which is of course the clause number 6, which is basically about determining the risks and opportunities and determining quality objectives, and of course planning the changes. Now, once we have planning, we move on to support and operation, which is respectively clause 7 and 8. Support is basically about providing resources, raising awareness and communication. Operation is basically about designing and development or production. Now, the thing with support and operation is that support is considered to be in the plan phase, and operation is considered or is taken to be in the do phase. Now we move on to performance evaluation, which is of course basically the check phase, and this is of course the clause number 9. And performance evaluation is of course about analysis and evaluation, internal audit and management review. Now, once done that, we move on to the act step, which is about improvement, and this is of course clause number 10. And of course, improvement is basically about corrective actions in the case of non-conformity, and of course continual improvement. So this is a never-ending cycle. And of course, all of this is supported by leaders or top management and their full involvement, which is basically clause 5. And of course, with that, this will provide, or this will of course reach customer satisfaction, and of course this will provide products and services. Alright, so the first clause of the standard is scope. Now, before we dive into that, we have to mention here that the first 3 clauses are more like informational clauses, which do not include any kind of actions or activities that the organization must do. So it's just like basic information. Now, the first clause, as I said, is scope, which is kind of like an introduction to the standard. Now, scope of the QMS, or scope of the quality management system, means identifying the goals and purposes of the standard. Of course, we're talking about ISO 9001, the 2015 edition or revision. So we're basically asking, what is the purpose of a QMS, or the quality management system, and how may the QMS reach its purpose or its goals? It also means identifying customer requirements. And while identifying customer requirements, the organization must consider regulatory or statutory requirements. In other words, we're talking about here the legal requirements. And we're also talking about the applicability of the standard requirements. Now, all the requirements of the standard are intended to be applicable to any organization regardless of its type or size or the products and services it's providing. So clause 2 is normative references, and normative references simply means any other documents which are referenced within the management system standard. In our case, in the case of ISO 9001, the 2015 revision, a lot of references are made to ISO 9000, 2015 quality management systems, fundamentals and vocabulary, which is of course what clause 3 is all about. Clause 3 is of course terms and definitions, and I have included a PDF within this video in which you'll see a few definitions which I've taken from the document. Now, it's not mandatory to purchase this document with the ISO 9001, the 2015 revision. So as I said, it's not mandatory to purchase this document along the standard. And so, therefore, information, we're talking about concepts, principles, and definitions, should be understood and applied as defined or explained in ISO 9000 fundamentals and vocabulary. Of course, we're talking about the document we just saw. And it is possible that such information may have different meaning or interpretation in some industries, regulatory, or business context.